today. Let's get it on. What's up, everybody? Thank you for spending your afternoon with us today. I'm really excited to have my three guests on here talking fantasy football. It's that time of year, guys. Everyone got that itch. Fantasy football season's coming up, so it's looking pretty good. Let's start off with my guy, Kyle Center, one of my full press coverage brethren, host of the Full Press Fantasy Podcast, Full Press Coverage Fantasy Sports Managing Editor. What's up, Kyle? How you doing today, bro?
Hey, George. Happy to be on. Happy to talk with you and everyone here, and hope we can help people. And I love talking fantasy, so like you said, let's get it on.
Sounds good, man. Perfect. I also have Ryan. Ryan's a good friend of the show. He's been on a couple of times. What's Give Fantasy Football. He's founder of the Announce the Picks. He's a good friend of the show. Ryan, how you doing today, bro?
Great. We're in the middle of, for all the fantasy folks that are familiar with it, we're in the middle of Scott Fishbowl season right now. So a couple of us are in the middle of our drafts, and great time to talk fantasy while that's going on.
100%, man. Exactly right. Last but not least, man, my boy Manny. I'm host of the Back Row Commander Show, talking sports with Manny. Been on the show a couple of times as well. Great to have you, bro. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's one thing that I can talk about 24/7, and it's fantasy football, man. Let's get it. Woo!
Yeah, boy. Okay, perfect. And so basically, this all started. I'm friends with Ryan, and I'm friends with all three of these guys, obviously. But Ryan and Manny, I saw them on the Twitter feed, just talking fantasy and just talking draft strategy. Like, man, I got that itch, man. I'm ready for fantasy football too. So I saw them talking. And I was like, you know what? I want to get them on the podcast. I want to talk about fantasy football. And two of the three of the guys in here are in the Scott Fishbowl, which is definitely a big competitive fantasy football league. Can one of you guys kind of touch on that and kind of explain to the layman, like a person, doesn't really play it that often, what is a Scott Fishbowl and what does it entail?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it at first if you don't mind. So Scott Fishbowl is kind of like a pro-am tournament for fantasy sports. So you got a lot of big fantasy analysts, anyone from Matthew Berry, people from CBS Sports, Roto World, The Athletic, all over the place. And you get to compete with just regular fans. So there's a lot of smaller analysts, bigger analysts, and fans that can all compete together. And you set yourself in a division just like you would in your regular league with 12 teams. But half of the league teams make the playoffs, and then you kind of play up against everybody, and they'll knock out like 10% in the first round of playoffs, and it goes through there and whittles down. It's a great tournament that is for Toys for Tots. They do a lot of great charity work as well. They do a podathon leading up to the kickoff of the drafts where they have a lot of people come on, talk about it, raise money for charity. I think they raised over $50,000 at this last podathon that just happened. And it's pretty cool. You get a chance to compete against like MLB players like Brad Ziegler, actors like Tom Everett Scott, Shane Battier is in it, Matthew Berry, like I said. So it's a really unique opportunity to set yourself in a division and play fantasy sports against some of your favorite analysts or celebrities or just fans and build out your community network.
That's awesome, man. That sounds really cool. How many people are in total that are playing in this in this whole big tournament?
It's over 3,000 this year, I believe. So
yeah,
that's
awesome. The math of 3,000 divided by 12, how many leagues that is running. But yeah, there's tons of drafting. And I think the dimension this year they've added, it's new themes for every year. Movie or video games, toys. Last year was music. This year it's cities because they're doing a bunch of live drafts as well. So you've got the, I guess, traditional online draft versus the in-person draft. Just funny, that's actually the traditional way, the old school way. But yeah, so that new element this year of the live drafts. People are connecting over their cities geographically, who's close, and not every draft is live, obviously, and that's also interesting with the timing, right? Some of these drafts started a couple weeks ago. Some are starting next week, while all the online stuff started on the 11th. So interesting that the timing and how some drafts completed before everything started. So people got a bit of ADP from live drafts. So just interesting dynamic this year for that.
That is
so what city are you in?
I live in Sudbury, so I chose to be in the Letterkenny division just because it almost basically counts as it. The Letterkenny is filmed here, so there were some real cities. Like they had a bunch of cities, like obviously the live drafts you were in, that was your city division, but they also included a bunch of fictional cities because there were that many divisions. As much as there probably are enough cities on Earth to go around, but I think you wanted to stick with the popular ones.
Yeah, man. I'm in Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. I'm actually like
I saw
pretty
that.
big Gilmore Girls fan, and I'm not afraid to admit it. I love it. My wife and I have ripped through like all the seasons probably 3 times together. It's our good bonding thing. But creating some really great relationships over there, and it's fun how they do it. Some fictional cities, like you said, some live cities, and then it's just cities that you kind of are like closest to. So if you lived in like Newark, New Jersey, you could network with people that live close to you and build those relationships. So Scott Fish has done a really great job building that out and building that community.
That's awesome. Do they do a pretty good job of spreading celebrities throughout all the different divisions, or how does that work out? Like, I guess, Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, so they balance it. They do. You usually have like at least 2 analysts within your division, and then they'll like balance the celebrities. And they'll usually announce, because you can pick your draft slot in your division. They usually announce the bigger names towards the end, so people aren't just like chasing them and filling up to be with the celebrity. So you log on one day and be like, I think Josh Norris was in mine last last year, who's a big Roto World analyst, and then he went to Underdog Fantasy. And he was actually one of the people that got me really motivated to do fantasy sports back in the day. So it was really cool to like compete up, head to head against him.
Is anyone famous in your league this year, or anyone that you noticed besides Josh? Like, you had Josh Norris last year, but who's in your division this year?
Yeah, so I have Linda Godfrey, and I was excited. Linda's one of the people that I interact with a lot on Twitter, and one of my favorite fantasy analysts. So I'm really pumped to be in there with her and competing. And then we got a bunch of fans, some who used to be former fantasy analysts, and we have a really lively group chat on Twitter, which is nice. So we're building out.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. What about you,
spoken with Linda, it makes sense that she's in the Hollow division. Sorry. My wife likes it more than I do, clearly. Although I do enjoy it. I'm not going to say it's not an awful show. People should check it out. It's good brand of sarcasm and humor. Sorry, George, we're taking over.
No, it's all good. I was wondering if you had anyone famous or anyone stands out in your division.
I think Andy Hall, who's a big radio guy in Iowa. He's probably the biggest in terms of followers on Twitter. But I don't know. Maybe I'm the big shot.
That's awesome. Cool, man. Sweet. All right, so speaking of fantasy, guys, what we're going to do today, I'm actually really excited about. We're going to have a live draft. So I'm actually going to pull up the board right now. I'm going through Fantasy Pros, and hopefully you guys can watch us at home. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at, basically Fantasy Pros does a great job of, forming composite rankings between all the different websites online. We're going to go through we're actually going to randomize our position. We're going to play a full PPR. We're going to go through a snake draft, and kind of the whole premise of our podcast today is kind of like processing, thinking what stands out. And for every single draft pick that we select, we're going to talk about it as a group, form a consensus and draft to kind of formulate a great team. So the goal of our podcast is to kind of see, what is our rationale behind these picks? What picks are kind of our sleepers for us? And who do we like this year in our draft? So let me randomize it really quick. Let's see what our position will be. All right, the 10th pick, which is, I hate the 10th pick, so we're going to kind of see how that all plays out. So let's start our draft, guys, and let's see how this goes. All right, so we'll kind of slow roll it real quick. So you guys can all see this. Everyone in the podcast can see it pretty well. All right, cool. Yeah. So we're looking at our board. So I'm going to pull it up over here, our draft board. We first pick Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Dalvin Cook, Najee Harris, Cooper Kupp, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, and Alvin Kamara. I don't see any major surprises there, guys. Do you see anything that kind of stands out to you, or anything you would do differently in those first picks?
Yeah, for me, I'm not a Saquon Barkley guy. I don't know if he comes back from this injury. Daniel Jones, it's the Giants. I mean, yes, he's a weapon, but we don't really even know what Saquon Barkley could do right now. So for me, I wouldn't go Saquon Barkley. I would rather take a chance on Alvin Kamara, even if he misses 6 games. That's just how I don't believe in Saquon Barkley. Or I'll go a stud wide receiver over Saquon Barkley, then go running back in the second round.
That's true. It's a full PPR. That's true about that. Kyle, Ryan, what do you guys think?
Kyle, let you take first.
Well, it's funny because George, his first comment was he doesn't like being at the 110, but does give the better second round pick.
That's
and
true.
I almost feel this is not a great year to be in the middle of the first, because I think there are
Right.
multiple landmines to avoid. I mean, Emmanuel already mentioned he doesn't like Barkley. I'm not particularly fond of Dalvin Cook. I think his reduced role in the passing game last year was very apparent, and I'm afraid that might continue. Frankly, I don't really love Kamara in the first round. Like I think I'm going to disagree with you, Emmanuel. I think I might rather have Barkley. But I think that the point is, especially in full PPR, it just seems more sense to go after the pass catchers will have that, will get those targets. Because I think that was the big issue with Kamara and Cook. They didn't get the targets last year that we were used to them getting. So, yeah, I don't know that anything stands out as surprising up to these first few picks, because I don't.
First round's pretty chalk, right? Yeah.
I don't want Dalvin Cook, but he's constantly going in the mid first like this, so it makes sense. Like, this is what you'd kind of expect by this point. But
so let me follow up with a question real quick. So I was reading an article about Dalvin Cook the other day. So I think Dalvin Cook had like 15 red zone carries. He had like a pretty. It was an outlier with the amount of carries that he had within like a 10-yard line or 5-yard line. He can only convert on 4. So Dalvin Cook is kind of like, he's noted as being someone who regressed this year. It's kind of what I'm catching through fantasy circles. My question to you is this. So I'm in a keeper league, right? And basically the way it works is you can keep a player for 4 years and you keep them in the draft. Like every year you keep him, you lose another round in the draft, if that makes any sense. So I have Dalvin Cook. He's in my final year in my keeper league. And one of my friends is Christian McCaffrey, and it's his final year in his league, or in his year. Would you trade Dalvin Cook for Christian McCaffrey straight up?
Yep.
100%?
Bigger upside. I mean, it's almost a no-brainer, because we know who Christian McCaffrey is when he's healthy. You see the redraft, he's still going number 2. In dynasty startups, he's going early second round. I've seen him go early second round in startups. So the value is there, because we know that he's a mega cheat code in PPR leagues. Guy that can get you potentially 100 catches if he's healthy. So you always take that chance. If he's healthy, I mean, he's a leader.
The production is there. The question is health. And that's kind of the thing. But I guess you have to roll the dice on it, right?
But Dalvin Cook's had health questions too, so it's not as if it's a clean bill of health on the other side.
Right. Sounds
just
good.
Curious, sorry, Ryan, but George, what is the scoring settings? Is it full PPR for you?
It's a half PPR in that league.
Okay.
Yeah, I tend to like Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, it's funny. I'm looking at the board that just happened, and my top 3 are Jonathan Taylor. I actually really like Najee Harris a lot. He's my number 2 running back, and then Christian McCaffrey. I'm very bullish on Dalvin Cook, though. I actually think Kevin O'Connell coming over to Minnesota is going to be a really nice offensive mind to plug in, and us Washington fans know Kevin O'Connell very well. I think he's going to reinvigorate that passing game for that backfield, and I think he's a good fit for Dalvin Cook. So I would prefer Christian McCaffrey in the half-point PPR. There's definitely, to me, more risk because he's had some injuries, but Christian McCaffrey hasn't had that, like, he hasn't torn his Achilles, he hasn't blown out the ACL, right? It's more ding injuries that have taken him out that they're serious and stuff, but I could see him being the number 1 player in fantasy this year for sure. So I think that's a good swap.
Yeah, I've heard they've been lighting it during practice and during training camp. They've been kind of lighting his load and kind of being mindful about how many reps he gets during practice. So he may be fresh for the start of the season. Honestly, 4 years of Christian McCaffrey isn't a bad thing at all. So I should definitely look into that. So, all right, guys, let's take a look at the board real quick. So right now we're looking at, this is the cheat sheet that Fantasy Pros, shared with us. Justin Jefferson sitting at top at number 8. We have Joe Mixon, Travis Kelce, Jamar Chase, and then DeAndre Swift. So this is kind of an interesting spot, right? We basically are at 110. We have the snake draft, so we basically have 12 teams. We're going to get two out of these 4 or 5 people in this tier 2 class. Mandy, let's start off with you, bro. What are you looking at over here? Who would you pick with this number 10 overall selection?
So I'm going to give you the easy answer and the answer that I would take. The easy answer is everybody is probably going to say Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase just because, they're stud wide receivers. But you can get stud wide receivers if you're looking at this tier 3. So for me, I think running back is the most important position. As much as I love Joe Mixon, I like DeAndre Swift's upside, especially being full PPR. So I'll go DeAndre Swift.
Interesting. Okay. Ryan, Kendra, Kyle, jump in. Either one.
Sure. So I would say when I do snake drafts like this, I like to break it down into tiers because every snake draft is its own animal. You could go in and have total different runs on positions. You could have 3 tight ends go in the first round. So when I look at this, I have 7 tier 1 running backs, and I have Joe Mixon as my last tier 1. I really like Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift.
I love Chubb.
I like Javonte Williams too. I'd probably, now that we're talking it out, like if I had guns to my head, I'd maybe lean towards the Justin Jefferson pick and then look at that next grouping of running backs of Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Javonte Williams, and say, okay, I'm gonna pick one of those guys on the back end, but lock in that stud wide receiver for me. I kind of talked myself out of the running back with Mixon right there.
So my first 2 instincts, one was Justin Jefferson, as Emmanuel pointed out. That's going to be, I think, a lot of people's answer potentially there. Full point PPR, a really ascending talent at wide receiver. The amount of catches he's had in his first 2 years is insane. So it should be, as long as he remains healthy, should continue to produce in that manner. I'd much rather draft Justin Jefferson than Dalvin Cook again. So I'm interested there. Where are you at on that, Ryan? Just real quick, like if you had the choice between both in a full PPR league, which one would you go with?
Ooh, you know what? I'd actually probably lean Dalvin Cook. I think Dalvin Cook's going to end up being a top 3 fantasy back this year. I'm really all in on Dalvin Cook.
And I'm not, so I'm saying Jefferson. So that is going to definitely be. I wonder a question if people are asking that in fantasy drafts. Maybe Cook's going too early to make that happen. But
it seems like ADP wise, it looks like Jefferson's going ahead of Cook for the most part. So I think most people would agree with you, Kyle.
So I guess maybe that is a question fantasy managers will have to ask themselves in the first round if they committed to one of these Vikings players, which one to take. But I think my answer here might be Travis Kelce, and I think that the question to ask is. Do we think A, he's going to be the number 1 tight end this year, and B, will he be enough of a difference maker to where it's worth it taking him in the first as opposed to some of the other guys in the second or even third round?
He's a first rounder. I think he's going to get 130 catches this year.
And I tend to I have him as the tight end 1 this year. I have him bouncing back, and I think enough of a difference as well to justify taking him in the first round. I think he doesn't have to necessarily replicate what he did in 2020. I mean, that was a smash year for him, and no one else was really close. Now, last year, Mark Andrews even surpassed him, and I think back to 2019, I think it was, he was the tight end 1, but George Kittle's points per game, I think, were identical to him. Mm-hmm. So it's 2 of the last 3 years it hasn't come through, but maybe it's something where it alternates every year, and then the loss of Tyreek Hill and those weapons should probably just mean the volume will be there. So I think my answer would be Travis Kelce, and I think it's a bit of a combination of if you pass on Jefferson or you pass on Swift, I think we're still happy with the running back or wide receiver we'd potentially get at the next one.
That's a good call. I was actually looking at that. You have Justin Jefferson sitting there, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, you have Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb. There's definitely a lot of options out there. That's an interesting strategy.
I'm looking at Devontae Adams and Stephon Diggs, and even maybe a CeeDee Lamb being a number 1. It's like I almost have to take either Kelce or one of these 2 running backs because I'm looking and I'm seeing a Devontae Adams, which I think he's going to have a great season.
I think he's have a big year too. I agree.
He's going to have a great year. So and then high touchdown upside in Devontae Adams. So you can mess around.
You want to go bold? You want to go bold and go Kelce, guys? How do you want to do it?
Can I throw out one devil's advocate for you?
All right, let's do it.
The wheels fall off the bus a little bit. He's going to be 33 come October, right? So I think for tight ends, that scares me. I would actually prefer some of the younger upside tight ends that you could get in the middle rounds. But if you guys want to go Kelce, I'm all board, but I just got to throw that out there real quick.
All right.
Let's have a final decision. Manny, final decision. Pull the trigger on. Pick somebody I'm going to go through, and we'll see the consensus vote, or we'll see the majority vote. Manny, pull one.
I'm taking Kelce.
Kelce. Kyle?
Kelce.
All right. Let's have some fun, man. It's a mock draft. Why not?
Let's
Let's
go
see
Kelce.
And let's see what happens. All right. So Travis Kelce, 110.
And again, probably a question a lot of managers are asking: What do I go tight end in the first or not? And this at the end of the first, see what kind of build you could potentially make with that. Well, there goes those 3 receivers.
Yeah, but I say the boom, boom, boom. Like we'll see if our decision paid off. So Ezekiel Elliott, I don't really know how I feel about him there. But then Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Devontae Adams. Let's look at the board real quick and let's see what happens. So, and guys, for those of you at home and for those of us in the podcast, they have the different position rankings over here by tiers, and they have the overall tier ranking over here. So looking at the board right now, we have our tight end position filled with Travis Kelce, Joe Mixon's still on the board if you want to go that route. Stephon Diggs, Aaron Jones, CeeDee Lamb still up there. Nick Chubb is still up there. One thing I want to throw out there, and you guys can maybe just bash me if you disagree, but I'm surprised they took Ezekiel Elliott over Nick Chubb. How do you guys feel about that?
over Mixon, over Chubb, over you're probably not going to see that happen in a lot of drafts.
Unless you're a Cowboys fan and you're like
Mixon finished as the RB3 last year, so you'll probably will see him go in most first rounds, I think. Mm-hmm. So seeing him fall out of the second is probably unusual, just that alone. But yeah, Zeke's probably not someone who's going in the first, to be honest.
So let me throw this out here and you guys can bash me, right? So my perspective here as more of a novice fantasy player, I would probably go running back here because I'd assume that wide receivers are deeper. Is that a fair assumption, or what do you guys think about that?
I think it's fair, and I'm going to give you some old school background. I started in 1995 doing my first fantasy draft, and that was when it was like running backs were king back in the day. But you had
Adrian Peterson, or whatever.
Yeah, actually, Curtis Martin was one of the
Curtis Martin, Tomlinson, all those guys. Yeah.
Draft. So I would never come out of generally a snake draft the first 2 rounds without one running back. I'm pretty heavy on running back. It's tough to, there's that small group of workhorses, and then you're starting to get like a middle tier of shared backfield. So I would probably pull the trigger on Joe Mixon here at this point.
Yep, I agree. I mean, it's a no-brainer. If you see Joe Mixon in the second round, you almost got to take him. The value is too great.
Yeah. And I think, the idea of, especially if you're passing on running back in the first, I think the idea you're doing it because you can come back in the second, whereas that cliff, I think, falls hard in the third. The one thing that would make me say, let's try a 0 RB build is simply because I have Stephon Diggs actually ranked ahead of Devontae Adams. So I would see it as a value that we get Diggs, but we don't necessarily have to go into that build either. And I think as much as I am really high on Diggs and I have him, I think, ranked as the wide receiver 4 this year, doesn't mean I'm going to be right. It doesn't mean that that opportunity cost. We could still get someone who might have that upside later anyway. Now, I will say, back to Manny's comment in the first round, I actually prefer Swift over Mixon as well. So I don't know if we want to get cute in that sense and go with Swift ahead of Mixon, but I think.
So tell me, why is Swift such a high? Is it just volume? Is that why people like him right now? Because I never had DeAndre Swift as a fantasy player.
If you're talking PPR, the guy's going to get catches, and if they use him properly, you're looking at Kamara when Kamara became Kamara. Like, you're looking at a CMC light, because the guy he is a special pass catcher coming out of that backfield. So that upside, if I'm drafting and in this PPR, I like the pass catching. I mean, like the guys that can catch passes. There's no point in getting a guy like Chubb. Yes, he's great. He gets the volume.
That's true. That doesn't catch the ball at all. Exactly.
Catch the ball at all. So I got 5 receptions is 5 points, and that's huge.
That's
compared
true.
to a guy that's going to run the ball 30 times, and you're wishing that they're touchdown dependent, like a Derrick Henry, and
So, quick question before we got to pull the trigger. We have a lot of rounds to go. Are you guys high on the Lions' offense this year?
Not really.
How many touchdowns?
I mean, it's improved.
Let me see.
No,
I'd say improved.
I saw your
but
board,
I'm not
Kyle.
super high on them.
Okay.
I would say in fantasy, it's all about the people that are trying to come back. Right? It's all about stats.
That's true.
About
stat stuffing, Manny. I like it.
They're going to be playing from behind, and if they're playing from behind, that's Swift catching 5 passes just off of dump offs because they're losing. So
that's true.
Bet on the Lions losing a lot of games and catching a lot of playing a lot of catch up ball. So
I'll throw my vote out there, but I'll take the consensus. I'll take the majority of the group. I like I see where you guys are going with Swift, but I kind of want to buy into that Bengals offense, right? With Joe Burrow and Chase and Higgins and all those guys. I just feel like, if they could get the ball downfield, there's going to be some, touchdown vulturing going on right there. And he's pretty explosive as well. So I vote for Joe Mixon, but I'll pass it around Ryan, then Kyle, then Manny. We'll see what happens. Kyle go first. Ryan go first.
I'm a Mixon guy too, so we might end up with a split here. But I'm the same way. I want to root for the Bengals a little bit. I want that rooting interest. And when I look at the seasons last year, you did have a Mixon outperforming Swift, and I feel like I want to see Swift do it before I have him jump Mixon.
Well, Kyle, what do you think?
I will say. I mean, maybe I'm speaking for Manny. I'm going to vote Swift, and I think if we are split on it, Manny and I did pick Kelsey last time, so we got our pick last time. So I'm fine if Manny's cool with it, deferring to you guys, and we can take it.
Sounds good. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that.
You gotta understand how to co-manage if you're co-managing a team, right?
All right, very good. Joe Mixon, here we go. Added to the list. All right, let's see what happens.
Now, I will say, Dynasty, it would be a no-brainer for Swift.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think
All right, take a look at it.
Swift's probably not falling out of the first round. Like he'd be the, like what we were saying about Mixon. Like it's shocked to see him fall that far. Would have been the same for Swift in a dynasty. I think probably going as a top 5 RB.
Right.
All right, so we're seeing running backs and wide receivers flying off the board right after our pick: Nick Chubb, Stephon Diggs, Aaron Jones, Swift, Lamb, Samuel, Evans, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill kind of fell pretty late, but I guess no one really has any faith in Tua. Let's take a look. Kyle Pitts off the board. Mark Andrews. Okay, you kind of saw that coming. AJ Brown, Pittman, Akers, and Antonio Gibson in the 3rd round. That's interesting because I've seen him fall all the way down to 4, to be honest with you. So I guess that's kind of like where he should be taken 3rd, 4th round right there. So
strategy and preference too. This guy is going running back heavy, and then we're gonna attack wide receiver later. So
that's a good point. Let's see what's going on with that guy. Yeah, he is going running back. Yeah, it's 3 running backs. That's a good point. Good catch, man. I didn't catch that. Kamara, Chubb, and Antonio Gibson. It's pretty solid little startup right there. Good for him.
Is full point PPR the league you want to go with that format in? Especially like Kamara makes sense, and I love Chubb.
Yeah, I'm not going
the Gibson pick. I don't know about that one just because what is
McKissick gets into it too. Yeah. Exactly. I agree.
But I'm thinking of that range of running backs. I guess we'll take a look. But who is there as pass catcher? Sorry, man.
Right.
I mean, Gibson is going to have a chance to get more receptions this year than he's had in any year. I think it's going to be a 50-50 split in terms of carrying the ball between him and the rookie. But I think he's going to get a lot of upside in receiving the ball this year.
Well, what about the Carson Wentz narrative that doesn't check down?
Yeah.
You don't believe it?
Yeah, well, maybe if he doesn't check down, maybe we get some actual routes. Maybe we, get Gibson in a slant or something. So that's
we'll see what happens. I'm throwing it out there.
Yeah, that's the whole.
I'm throwing it out there.
Because I think it's you know what? There's one name that stands out to me in terms of that guy. There's maybe 2 games that in terms of running backs that'll catch passes, but one that we've kind of really seen get the volume and do it that I'd prefer in redraft. But I'm also probably higher on that guy than most, it seems. So I don't know if we want to talk about that as our next pick.
Well, let's take a look at the board first, and then Kyle, I'll tap into you in a second. So let's look at the overall board. Basically, T. Higgins is the highest rated. That's a suggestion that Fantasy Pros is kind of throwing our way. Then Deontay Johnson. Then we're looking at tier 5, David Montgomery, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, Josh Allen. So no quarterback has been taken. Our wide receivers are about 12 deep. Running backs are about 16 deep. Tight ends, we already got the best one in the game with Travis Kelce, and they're looking at Darren Waller, number 4. Before I throw it over to Kyle, let me pose a question to you guys. Are you guys quarterback hunters? Would you pull the trigger on like a Josh Allen right now, or do you guys just keep waiting, keep that mania? I see the little Takemi Mutombo mania. What's going on?
It's in my house.
What do you see? Not in this house. Okay. All right. Why? You see, there's so many. You can get them later on.
Many, man. There's so many.
Okay.
Opportunity.
That's cool.
When you're playing in a 1 quarterback league, I think you got to wait on quarterback. If it's 2 quarterback, I would have been taking some of these guys in the first round. But right. 1 quarterback, more standard leagues, I think you got to hold off and wait it out.
And if you wait forever, the better your team looks.
That's true. You built up a more well-rounded team. I can see that rationale. I got Josh. I'll be honest with you though. Last year I had Josh Allen. He carried me to a championship, so I can see both sides still. But I think you get Herbert late. You can get a bunch of guys later on in the draft. I can see that there.
How early did you take him?
I got him like maybe 4th or 5th round, something like that. I bought him pretty early.
So that's probably the range where you'd want to go for that top tier quarterbacks, 4th, 5th round. Yeah. Establish yourself. Especially if it's start 2 running back, 2 wide receiver. If you can kind of get those 4, or with us an elite tight end, if you can get 4 of those starters and then get your quarterback, that's fine. That's probably not too early. But I think a lot of times you won't see the QB1 go in the 5th round. You'll usually see them go here in the 3rd round.
Sometimes in the 3rd round.
That's where it gets a little too pricey, especially
people will definitely be aggressive with it.
So for me, it comes down to the tiers again. Like I want to see the running back tier and the wide receiver tier kind of deplete, and then I'll say, okay, now I'm going to pull that trigger on that elite quarterback.
And to your point, Ryan, I think we all might have Josh Allen as our QB1, but do any of us have him as a tier of his own? Because I know I don't. I've got it at multiple. I think it's 3 right now in that top tier. You can even make that argument on 4 guys, really, but
there's 4 on this.
So as much as I believe in Josh Allen as the QB1, not at if I can get someone I think is comparable enough, because Herbert barely finished behind him last year. Allen was the QB1, but Herbert was right there with him. So
and
if
there's
you
always
can wait a
Patrick
couple rounds to
Mahomes.
get that guy,
I'd be waiting.
Always Patrick Mahomes.
You can grab Mahomes in the 6th round, and he comes in and he's QB1. So
That's true, 100%.
And I think what we're about to get into is the players that are available for us here. They're too good to pass up on. Again, the opportunity cost isn't just which round you're taking, but which players you're passing up on at the chance to get that quarterback. And
so,
I know there's
Kyle,
two guys in particular that I really want here. So
me too.
Talk about them. Go ahead, Kyle.
So, I'll make reference to my earlier comment. Instead of Antonio Gibson, I think the last team should have gone David Montgomery. Probably a safer pass catching floor, and he's definitely shown it, and probably just as much carry volume as Gibson. And I know neither offense, I think, is what we expect to be like high volume in terms of touchdowns. So there's the risk is kind of with both, but I think that team should have gone Kamara, Chubb, Montgomery. And while you get the elite efficiency with Chubb, you get two pass catchers in Kamara and Montgomery to kind of solidify in a full PPR league. And I'd like to do that here too with Montgomery as the RB2. I don't know if that would be my ultimate vote though, but that's probably one way I'm thinking. There's one other guy, but I'll leave some other space for everyone else. I don't want to steal everyone else's answers.
All right, Ryan, what do you got, bro?
Yeah, for me, I'm actually looking at the tier of wide receivers here, and I tend to not have T. Higgins as high as everybody else does. I still think Jamar Chase is the lead dog in that offense, and I don't like to chase the wide receiver twos this early. DJ Moore, I feel like got an uptick, and I know people don't love Baker Mayfield, but when you have DJ Moore putting up 1,000-yard seasons with what he's had at quarterback the last few years, to me, I'm going to see that he's had 4 touchdowns the last 3 years, very consistent. I think this is the year where that gets an uptick, and I'm a big believer in DJ Moore's talent. So I feel like that's probably the direction that I would lean. I also actually like if I look at that tier, like I'm starting to look at, as a Commanders fan, Terry McLaurin, and I feel like with Carson Wentz, man, I truly believe that he's going to have a bigger season. I think I would wait to see if he makes it to the turn before I pull the trigger on him there.
I think he probably could.
So I'd wait there. And then the other name that I kind of think is a little bit sexy here is like the Breece Hall, just what could he be? And I also like J.K. Dobbins because I think that, I loved J.K. Dobbins's skill set coming out of college, and I think he could be an elite running back. And I think we just haven't gotten a chance to see it.
I had DJ Moore in a couple of leagues last year. He definitely has a high floor. I agree with you. He got a lot of volume. He had 163 targets last year, so he's definitely a solid pick. Let's start finalizing some things. So, Manny, your last thought before we pull the trigger on some people. What are you thinking?
The pick here, the only pick that makes sense is Travis Etienne. If we're talking about full PPR, yes, we don't know who he is. We don't know what he can bring to the table. But what I do know is that he is a heck of a pass catching back, and he's teaming up with his old quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. Now, for Ryan, why would you draft DJ Moore when you can wait around and get Terry, a guy who has a better touchdown upside? He's had poor quarterback play, and he's better. So for me, I'm gonna go Travis Etienne and come right back and grab Terry. That's just me, though.
Yeah, the thing with Etienne that scares me is there's a couple injuries I like to stay away from. Liz Frank injuries are one of them, and that's what he's coming off of. Achilles injuries I don't like to touch. And I still think James Robinson, and I'm just saying Achilles injuries I don't touch, but I think James Robinson is still the lead dog as a running back there. Now, to your point, Etienne's going to catch passes, but is he going to have 500, 400 rushing yards? I don't know if I'm willing to take that at this point.
All right, let's finalize our decision. Go ahead, Kai. One last little comment.
Because Manny did make a question, like, why take DJ Moore if you could get McLaurin later? There is the thought of you could get both. Like you could double tap and try and get two wide receivers here as well. Like, and I do like the thought of solidifying the RB2. But again with Etienne, I guess the scary thing is it is all just projection. We are guessing, right? So maybe there's a bit more certainty to invest.
Oh, Breece is always a nice option. It's either one of those two guys for me.
That's fair. Yeah,
so
I'm ready to finalize my vote if you guys are ready. I haven't actually named my vote yet, so I don't know if you want me to throw the name out before you guys vote.
Go ahead.
Kyle, vote.
So my vote's for Deontay Johnson, actually. He was the wide receiver 8 last year, and we can talk about Trubisky and the lack of success, but I think this is pretty unequivocally a QB upgrade for him in terms of arm efficiency, like downfield targets, which, I mean, that killed Juju's value last year. Deontay has been able to make it work kind of throughout his career, even the year when they had, as a rookie, he had Mason Rudolph most of the season, and he still ended up with like 800 yards as a rookie. So he's constantly made it work with really poor quarterback play. I just think, he was a wide receiver 1 last year with Ben. What can he do with Trubisky, who has hyper targeted receivers before? Like, he finds that number 1 target, he'll give him a really solid target share. I know that's been kind of a thing that people have kind of used as a fear. Oh, Ben just targeted him so much. Trubisky kind of does the same thing, but maybe these targets are more downfield than they were with Ben. So, better yards efficiency, maybe even better touchdown efficiency. So I think Deontay could be a wide receiver 1, and he's the last guy. Because I'm like you, Ryan, not so excited about T. Higgins, especially in a redraft league. I kind of like his price dynasty-wise, but to me, I think Deontay's the last guy I really vision as a top 12 wide receiver left available to us, and someone I would want it to be the wide receiver 1.
All right, so 1 vote for Deontay Johnson. Ryan, what do you got?
I'm actually going to throw a little bit of a screwball out there now that I'm looking at the shape of the running backs, and I'm going to go J.K. Dobbins.
Okay, J.K. Dobbins. Okay, out of left field. Okay, Manny, what do you got?
I'm gonna go Breece Hall since you guys talking out of Travis Etienne in redraft.
Where are we going with this?
So good.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie, Manny. I'm not gonna lie. I like Breece Hall a lot too, but I think we can probably wait on him. I think he has some high volume. Maybe get him next round. We'll see what happens. So, all right. So let's do this. Deontay, I think we're all talking ourselves into waiting maybe to those come around for the wide receiver. Let's dial in on a running back real quick. So is anybody willing to waver a little bit on their running back position? Kyle, what if you could pick a running back, you pick David Montgomery?
Yeah.
All right.
I'd lean more towards I'm going to go more Breece Hall just for the fun of it.
Yeah, I'm a rookie 4th round drafter.
I like Breece more than say Etienne or Dobbins simply because of the health. So yeah, if we were to go anyway with the young guys, I'd probably go Hall as well. So
let's have some fun, fellas. Let's do this. And by the way, I'm gonna post up our final draft board on Twitter and let's see what happens. Probably gonna get some heat on us, so we'll see how this goes. So Breece Hall, welcome to our squad, baby. There we go. Let's see what happens with the next draft picks. All right, draft board. All right, so DeAndre Hopkins, T. Higgins, David Montgomery, DK Metcalf. So that wasn't too bad. That wasn't too big of a hit for us. David Montgomery comes off the board, but we still have some wide receivers still available. Let me kind of pull up our team real quick. So we have our running backs are Joe Mixon or Breece Hall. Pretty interesting. Both have the same bye week, by the way, week 10 bye week. Travis Kelce's our tight end. We still haven't drafted a wide receiver yet. So I think it's about that time. Deontay Johnson is kind of looking at us in the face. He's the highest rated wide receiver on the board, number 14, according to Fantasy Pros. We have DJ Moore, Waddle, Cooks, and McLaurin. So there are some interesting options there. So peace out, bro. What do you think, Ryan? What do you got?
I'm going to stick with the DJ Moore train, but I'm not, if it gets close, I could be swayed to Deontay Johnson.
We got Kyle's pick, right?
Yeah.
Put that flag down. All right, Manny, what do you got?
Out of this group, I will go with the guy that gets the most targets and the most receptions. So I would go Deontay Johnson.
All right, let's do it. This is a very interesting draft. I never collaborated on a draft this heavy before. I don't know if I'd like this is completely different than I would have particularly drafted. So we'll see how this all plays out when it's all said and done. So
it's interesting. I was actually thinking, I was like, this is why I don't do shared teams. I don't know that I can do it.
They're giving up a lot of power for sure. I already got McLaurin probably and a couple other people. So let's take a look over here. All right, so breaking it down, Darren Waller, Josh Allen, Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore flying off the boards, Mike Williams, Cooks, Mahomes, Waddle, Hollywood Brown, Kittle, ETN got there, Justin Herbert's off the board, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Dude, that guy was a menace during the playoffs last season. He was going crazy. I'm sure you guys definitely felt that for sure. So, all right, so we had our running backs pretty much taken care of, unless you want to add some depth, because it is a flex league. Second, the best running back on the board is Josh Jacobs. J.K. Dobbins is still on the board, and A.J. Dillon's still floating around. Wide receivers, if you want to go that route, let's take a look and show more here. Allen Robinson going over to the Rams. Jerry Jeudy with Russell Wilson at quarterback. Mike Thomas potentially for a bounce back. And Juju in Kansas City. And the highest rated person on Fantasy Pros board is Josh Jacobs, followed by J.K. Dobbins. And Lamar Jackson's still floating around too if we want to think about quarterbacks. So What do you guys think? Let's start off. Let's kind of get a better rotation going on. So, Manny, we'll start off with you. What are you thinking right now?
Man, there's so much on the board right now. It can go either way. If you want to go ahead and get a Lamar Jackson because of the rushing upside and the touchdown upside, I mean, he's there. Then I'm on the Dobbins train and the Josh Jacobs train. Okay, so that works. And then you got Jerry Jeudy, the potential, and then you have the Allen Robinson potential as well. So I'm down for whatever you guys want to do. I just threw out some names that I like, and they can go either way.
Well, my first comment, J.K. Dobbins skill set more than I can tell you. So I will say I'd fight for this one because we passed him up last time. I thought there was a 0% chance he'd be here, and I running backs are so hard for me to find. I feel like
a Ravens running back too. He's gonna get a lot of touches, man, for sure. To the goal line as well. I agree to that. But Kyle, what do you got?
But that was my first thought. As soon as we saw that draft board, okay, you saw Etienne go, but then not a lot of running backs. My first thought was, Ryan's guy, J.K. Dobbins, is still there for him. And we conceded. You wanted DJ Moore last time. We conceded. Taking Deontay Johnson, so I feel like we get him back and take Dobbins here for sure. And I just kind of want to put out, do we like doing the Dobbins-Lamar Jackson stack if Jackson does come back? Because he would be the next quarterback. He's my QB4.
Okay.
It's maybe
that'd be nice,
one,
actually.
The one offense you almost want the QB RB stack, even though it sucks because in a sense it's maybe not the good offense for because he doesn't throw to the running back a lot, but you can kind of monopolize a lot of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns.
Right. But if you had the running back to throw to, that's kind of what I wonder about a little bit. Is like I don't think he's had someone like J.K. Dobbins that
as a rookie, as a rookie, how much are you going to trust him on passing downs? That's more of a coaching staff thing than anything. So he really he has he had Dobbins. I guess that in that one season. We'll see now. They may not have a choice but to throw to the running backs if that's what the offense kind of leads towards, losing talent at wide receiver. So,
I think picking Dobbins is a pretty solid building block for our team. The only knock that I could say, we're going to do it. I think the only knock is that all of our running backs will have a bye week 10. So we're not going to have any running backs in week 10. But do you guys even think about that at all when you guys are drafting it all or no?
I don't think about it early. Honestly, I personally don't. And sorry to cut you out there, Kyle. I just want the best team coming out of the draft, and like with injuries, so much unpredictability during the season to focus on 1 week that's not even a playoff week or anything like that. I'll punt that week and I'm fine with that. So I'd rather have Dobbins for the whole year.
I don't even know if you have to punt that week either. I mean, you can figure out other running backs later, pick up guys through the season, and you can kind of, knowing that week's coming, you can, plan it to, I'm flexing a wide receiver that week, and I'm just going to focus on those 2 running back spots. So there are ways to work around it. And like you said, especially not early in the draft, later on in the draft where you can kind of fill in the back gaps. Like this is something where I might hesitate. 3 running backs in the same bye week. I might question it. But if Dobbins is the best player there, and we clearly view him as a tier above all the other running backs, then you follow the tier.
I agree. I think going into this, I'll just real quick before I throw over to Manny. I think having Mixon and Dobbins as a running back combination is something you can be pretty confident with moving forward, right? I kind of like that a lot. So, but Manny, anything before you pull the trigger on this?
Nah, I'm with it.
I'm with it. All right, let's go. All right, boom, J.K. Dobbins, welcome to our squad.
Oh, we got that stack.
Yeah.
All right, so we're looking at TJ Hawkinson. So Clyde's Edward Hilaire, I had him last year, drove me crazy. He went off the board. Josh Jacobs, TJ Hawkinson, Logan Thomas, and we're sitting here. So
Logan Thomas went too early. I'm sorry.
Yeah, dude, he's not even going to play the first couple of games of the year. So we'll kind of see how that goes.
Yeah, I think he gets pumped.
All right, so Lamar Jackson, 48% agree to select him. I'm not going to lie, Lamar Jackson will be a lot of fun to have on the team, plus with that running back stack. But let me pose a question to you before we jump on this. Is he that much better than Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, even Dak? What do you guys think about that?
I have them all in the same tier, so the first question would be no. But I also do have them as the top of that tier, so better, but not that much better. I agree to where you can wait. So it is a fair question afterwards.
What's up, brother?
Yeah, I got Lamar, Kyler, and Joe on the same tier as well. Those are some of the guys I grab in the first 6 picks of dynasty startups. But if you're talking about who has the most upside out of the 3, it's Lamar Jackson. I mean, only one of those guys have rushed for 1,000 yards, and he's a running back and a quarterback. So out of those 3, I'll probably lean Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson's He's a proven commodity. My one question before I throw it over to you, Ryan, real quick is, all right, this is my thought, right? You can take Lamar Jackson and just freaking, there's going to be some games where he just freaking carries your fantasy team and you're going to win, right? You can go the Lamar Jackson route. Would you rather have Lamar Jackson outright and then a later wide receiver, because we need another wide receiver, right? Or would you want to roll the dice on like an Allen Robinson in LA or Jerry Jeudy in Denver with Russell Wilson? What do you think? Like, take one of those guys and then get a Kyler later on or Burrow later on. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like as we talk this out, and we haven't even brought up Aaron Rodgers, and I feel like there's good quarterback depth. I feel like at this point, I'd probably pull the trigger on the receivers because we got a long turn to come back now. We got both, directions. We're a later first round pick, so we got to go through that whole back end of that round for the snake and then come back to us. So I feel like for me, I'd probably pull the trigger on the receiver now and make sure I lock in someone that's dependable. And then I'd probably look on the next round to draft those quarterbacks before that huge run comes.
My boy East Coast Gridiron basically is chiming in on the chat. He says, I think if you look at the weapons Lamar has, he carries the Ravens. Switch him on any of those guys you name teams, and he's close to a tier A QB. So he's basically saying Lamar Jackson carries the Ravens, so maybe it would be a good pick to have right there. Let's dial it in. Let's kind of plug it in right now. We started off with Manny as the first vote. Let's do Kyle this time. Kyle, what's your first vote?
Yeah, I think Ryan's argument at the end kind of swayed me, and I just thinking, looking at through the results earlier, I believe Cortland Sutton had already gone, right?
I believe so. Yeah, he has. Yep.
Which seems to be the case. It seems like he seems to be going first, and then Jerry Jeudy coming in later. And when teammate ambiguous situation, who's going to be the number one wide receiver for Wilson? We really don't know. It kind of does make sense to go with the cheaper guy. So I'll vote in Jerry Jeudy here.
All right, Jerry Jeudy. One vote for Jerry Jeudy. All right, Ryan. They'll go to Manny.
So I love Jerry Jeudy as a route runner. I will never fight against Jerry Jeudy. I have him in almost all my dynasty leagues. So I might as well throw in all my chips on Jerry Jeudy and go him here. I think Allen Robinson would be the only other question because he's been so dependable.
And now he has Matt Stafford
last year. And now he's got Stafford running into that role, replacing, Robert Woods, Odell Beckham, all those guys. So I feel like there's a lot of volume for him with the Matthew Stafford offense and
for sure.
Sean McVay. So I think we see a resurgence there. So I feel like Robinson's a little bit safer of the pick, but I'm good with either of those two, to be honest with you.
All right. Good analysis. Robinson seems safer because he's already produced, whereas Jeudy, it's the upside of where he could be the number one, so maybe a higher ceiling. Sorry,
100%. Manny Fresh, tiebreaker. What do you got, bro?
As much as I love Lamar Jackson here, I got to go Jerry Jeudy.
Okay.
I'm a Jerry Jeudy guy. Yeah.
Let's dial it in, Jerry Jeudy. Let's go upside.
Interesting experiment with this quarterback tier is how many of them fall and what becomes available to us next.
Right.
A couple of the guys that we wanted. Dude, there's the run. We're starting to see him come off the board a little bit. All right, let's take a look. So basically, we took Jerry Jeudy, Lamar Jackson, very next pick. Joe Burrow's off the board. Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott. We missed that run, but there's still some good quarterbacks out there. Let's take a look at the cheat sheet real quick and see where people stand. The top suggestion is Tom Brady, 44%. Miles Sanders is still up there. That's the highest on the Fantasy Pros board. We're good with running backs. Quarterback is probably the pick to take right now if we want to go that route because we have an empty spot. Are there any value picks in wide receivers or running back that you kind of be brave with right now and maybe get the quarterback coming around or just pull the trigger on the quarterback right now? What do you guys think? Anybody? I guess Ryan, you're next on.
Yeah. So I mean, for me, I look at is Aaron Rodgers still on the board here?
Yeah, dude. It's Tom Brady, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford, Aaron Rodgers.
I think it's the most overreaction in the world that Aaron Rodgers has been falling the way he is falling in fantasy drafts. I think he's produced no matter who his receivers are.
Monster.
If you look at his game logs without Devontae Adams and you make that a full season, you get him actually performing better than his MVP season. So I feel like everyone's just saying Devontae Adams is gone. Aaron Rodgers is going to fall off a cliff. Well, he didn't fall off a cliff when Jordy Nelson left and when Randall Cobb left for the first time. And he's had a turnover of his receivers throughout his career that we've seen, and he just produces. It's not like they didn't go out and get weapons. They got Christian Watson they drafted Romeo Doubs. They brought in Sammy Watkins. I still think there's a chance that Julio Jones ends up there. I just think it's a huge overreaction. And I would look to Aaron Rodgers, but to your point, George, I think looking at Brady, Wilson, Rodgers, I'm okay with passing one more time, being brave around that turn and saying, I think 3 of those guys, one's going to be there.
Just
All right,
knowing it's a shorter turn than it was in the last round.
That's
Yeah,
true.
I was thinking
That's
that
right.
too.
That's true. That's a good point. Actually, I forgot about the shorter term. But yeah, we definitely, there's going to be 4 picks. One of those guys are going to be available. So who's the person that's worthwhile to basically take a shot? And would that be Miles Sanders? We don't really need a running back. Tyler Lockett, Drake London, who has a lot of upside, maybe the number 1 wide receiver in Falcons.
I was
I
going
don't
to
know,
say
Treylon Burks.
probably going wide receiver here, I think, anyway.
Wide receiver. I agree. We need some more depth there. So
I like the potential volume of Drake London at this point. I think that's a nice pick.
I kind of like
would
that
probably
too.
be my route.
That's kind of where I'm leaning, actually. What do
The
you guys
double
think,
rookie
Kyle?
team with Hall and London. I mean, they're probably, a lot of times the 101, 102 in a lot of rookie drafts. So, it does make it maybe went a little early on Hall, but it does kind of seem, are we getting a good value here on London?
Yeah,
I think
so. Early on Hall, I think Hall was selected in the 3rd round, which I normally wait to the 4th round to grab a rookie back.
It's a passion pick by Manny, it's all good.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so Manny. All right, so what do we do? So I guess Ryan, it's your turn to pick first. You said Drake London, right?
I would take Drake London in this.
I'm thinking that way too. Me personally, Kyle,
you go back
Kyle,
up to the list of oh, there it is. Sorry, I thought there was one name that stood out, but now I can't.
Wide receivers: Tyler Lockett, Drake London, Ayuk, Christian Kirk, Burks, Claypool.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking he would. Maybe he's the number 1 guy in Tennessee, but it's also like, what does his recovery look like? Is he someone you can count on early season, especially if we're going with Hall and Dobbins already? Maybe we shouldn't go with a receiver that maybe has question marks at the start of the year. Which, I think London would probably be my pick as well.
London would be a fun person. Like I also there is that 1% of me that always likes to kind of root for a player too. I think Drake London would be kind of fun to have on the team as well. So you guys all agree to that?
I agree to that. And I'll give one thing of advice to people listening. If you love a guy in fantasy, take the guy in fantasy, because even if you don't win your league, you're going to enjoy the season a hell of a lot more than if you want to root for someone and you pass on them and they land on somebody else's team. Especially in dynasties, there's nothing worse than not getting your guy. Get your guy. Trust your gut.
Nothing is more fun than sitting with your boys. You got the happy hour. You got the 1:00 game at the bar watching football. And you said a little ESPN ticket come up, and your boy that you love is scoring a touchdown. It feels pretty good when that happens. So It's all good. Real quick, our boy Manny has to go, man. So Manny, I appreciate you got some family duty you got to take care of. Manny, before you sign off, man, just tell the listeners where they can find you, some upcoming products you're working on. So break it all down for us, bro.
All right, man. Before I go, I want to say this is my first Drake London share. If you guys want to know what I really feel about Drake London, hit me up on Twitter and we can talk about Drake.
I'm going to post the board and I'm going to tag all you guys into it. We'll kind of see what the reactions happen. We'll see how it goes down.
All right, so you guys can find me on YouTube. Talking Sports with Manny is a buffet table from fantasy football, NBA, Washington football coverage or Commanders coverage, Lakers, Wizards, you name it, you can get it there. Also, the podcast Talking Sports with Manny, and then the Back Row Commanders show. Thank you so much for having me on. I had a blast with George, my guy Ryan, and Kyle. Nice meeting all of you guys. And
nice to meet you, Manny.
Good times, man. A lot of fun, man. We got to do this again. All right, peace, bro.
All right, bro.
All right, so basically, East Coast Gridiron gives us a thumbs up. He says Drake London is too good. I like it, man. I think having that big body wide receiver is going to be a good call for us. So I do like that there. So let's kind of look at how the board shook out. Looking over here. Okay, so Drake London, Chris Carson, Miles Sanders, Damon Harris, James Robinson. Honestly, guys, I think we got away with one there. I don't think anything really hurts us over those next 4 picks, in my opinion.
Team 11 going completely off the board. Those last 4 picks: Clyde, Logan Thomas, Chris Carson, James Robinson.
That's rough. Yeah, that's pretty. And then
even pretty early on DeAndre Hopkins too. I gotta say, even Zeke. Like that whole team is probably not. Like glad to be drafting like next to them because it's allowing value to fall to us, right? You'd be thankful for that.
That's like a 2020 dream team or something right there, right? A couple of years ago, not right now. All right, go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say that's why I like hitting the running backs heavy early because you're seeing a good amount of receivers still on the board. You're seeing a good amount of quarterbacks still on the board. There was that run of tight ends. We didn't have to worry about it with Kelsey. So I kind of like how things are shaking out for us right now.
I agree. And Gridiron, man, I totally agree with you. I was a big I was a big Drake London fan. Like he was like kind of a late riser for me in the draft. There was some talk about him not having separation issues in regard to like breaking free at USC. But I was kind of like near the end of it, I kind of was hoping that he'd fall to 12 to Washington, but we all saw how that played out. But I do like him in Atlanta. I think the Falcons are putting a premium on getting like kind of like these like stud athlete players, like people that have like outlier factors that make them really good, like Kyle Pitts and Drake London's size and Kyle Pitts' explosiveness on the inside. So I do think it's pretty good. So we talked about quarterback, guys. I think we're going to basically still continue with that because I think our options are still on the board. So let's go over here real quick.
All 4 guys that we talked about are all still
everybody, man. So it's kind of pick your flavor now. Do you pick the ageless GOAT Tom Brady? Do you pick Russell Wilson on a new team? The Super Bowl champion Matt Stafford, who has all this weapons, and Sean McVay basically leading this offense with his innovations. Then we have Aaron Rodgers, at arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks of our generation with a retooled offense. So, I mean, I think it's a win-win. For me, I would probably feel more comfortable with Matt Stafford or Aaron Rodgers. I love Aaron Rodgers. Whenever there's an opportunity for me to get Aaron Rodgers, I get him on my fantasy team. But I wouldn't be mad at any one of these guys. Tom Brady was on my team last year. I believe, was he quarterback 1 last year when it was all said and done, or he was up there?
He, Allen, and Herbert all finished like with almost identical points to where like your scoring setting might have dictated who was the QB1 overall, and certain settings might have been Allen, certain settings might have been Herbert, others might have even been Brady. So, yeah, you can. Top 3 for sure. You can basically say produce like the QB1 overall.
Gotcha.
Thank you, East Coast, for good vacation. I don't know if they're going to the East Coast for the vacation, but
I don't know. We'll see. I don't know where he's going.
Coast to coast.
All right. So I don't know. So for me, I would probably lean. Let's Gridiron jump on here again. Thanks, brother. I appreciate it, bro. So basically, I would probably go Stafford or Rodgers. I'll kind of put that out there. I don't know how you guys feel. Russell Wilson has that running potential, but maybe he is kind of losing a step, getting older. Brady, is he ever going to fall off a cliff? We'll see how that goes. I guess it is technically Kyle's turn because we're kind of rotating back and forth. So Kyle, lead the conversation. What do you got?
So my natural answer would be Russell Wilson. But Rodgers makes sense as well. And I think both of them, it's just throughout their career, high percent touchdown rates. Like these are guys that are going to throw a lot of touchdowns, no matter what they've had at weapons, no matter the situation, the offense, whether, because I think Brady, he's had years in his career where the running offense has been so good where he hasn't had to throw, but you can probably chalk him up to just that same type of really efficient touchdown thrower year over year. Stafford was last year. Is it a 1-year fluke? Probably not, but he would be probably 4th on my list just because it's been more inconsistent through his career, whereas it's been consistently efficient with those 3, but specifically Wilson and Rodgers. I think the reason I'd lean Wilson, we have Jerry Jeudy. That makes a really natural stack. I think I've got Wilson ahead of Rodgers anyway, and that's part of thinking, okay, they both had really efficient touchdown rate careers. I think I like Wilson's supporting cast of weapons right now.
That's true. It's a pretty well-rounded offense for sure.
If you look at those receivers, well, even that, if you look at those receivers, touchdown rates, their career is probably not that great either, to be honest, by comparison. But it just feels like it's maybe a bit higher threshold of talent than what Rodgers has. So I can maybe foresee Wilson hitting that higher touchdown rate more easly. But I think Ryan's already mentioned Rodgers a few times, so I get it.
So Ryan, real quick before you make that decision, Ryan, how do you feel about in both you guys? How do you feel about stacks? Do you guys like the quarterback wide receiver stack? Is it like, do you think it's a smart position to take, or do you think it's more of a risk? Or how do you guys feel about like that Wilson Jeudy stack or any wide receiver quarterback stack? How do you guys feel? Well, Ryan, what do you think?
There are a lot of very smart people who do this that love stacks. And I think where I like stacks more is when I'm doing like the daily fantasy or things like that, where you really want to get that like
matchup.
Exactly. They both score, you're getting double the points. I get that. And it's good for the daily fantasy stuff. I tend to just go for the best players, and that's always how I've been. I don't know if that's a good strategy or not. It's worked for me in the past, so I don't tend to worry about it. And it does suck when a stack doesn't produce and you're kind of out of that game. So it's a little bit more of a risk reward kind of strategy. And I think that's okay. I think tournaments like Scott Fish Bowl, where you have to stand out from 3,000 other teams, right? Like stacks, I think maybe make a little bit more sense, or daily fantasy when you're up against, tens of thousands of entries. For me, stacks aren't as important. The one thing I wanted to hit on just the Rodgers Wilson thing is, it's not like Russell Wilson didn't have good weapons last year. I feel like people are bringing him to Denver and putting him in a new tier, but he was throwing a DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's not like he didn't have talent. You got Cortland Sutton, who's been banged up. You got Judy, who still hasn't produced at the NFL level and has great expectations. But I just don't understand this year that Aaron Rodgers being out of the tier, like even on Fantasy Pro site here, like to have Aaron Rodgers outside of that tier is just, again, it's such an overreaction to me. I took him at pick 2-1 in the Scott Fish Bowl. I had no problem with him being my number 1 quarterback and going all in there. So actually, he was my 112. I take that back. He was my first round pick. So I'm a big Aaron Rodgers fan. I wouldn't be opposed to Russell Wilson either. I just feel like we saw regression in Russell Wilson last year that everybody's kind of ignoring because he got a change of scenery. We haven't seen any regression from Aaron Rodgers. I know he lost weapons, but again, he's lost weapons before and he's proved to me that he could do it. So I'm good with either pick, though, to be honest with you. So I'll let you two tie break that.
All right, so we got 1 for Rodgers, 1 for Wilson. Is that what we're doing? All right, I'm gonna pull Rodgers. I love that guy. I think you sold me, Ryan. I agree. I think I usually like Russell Wilson's typically on my team year over year as well. I like him late because people kind of overlook him, but he did have a slight regression last year. So maybe it might be an ongoing trend. We have no idea what's going to happen. So I think I'm going to bank on Aaron Rodgers' arm over the total package of Russell Wilson. So we'll see if that bites me in the butt later on. So
Cal, we'll get to the next one.
to the point on stacking, I think it's like Ryan was saying, you want to it's great if you can have a singular outcome that can boost up multiple players. But again, you're really looking at that week to week, game to game, something you're maybe hoping to have in the fantasy playoffs more than carry you through the season. Right. But I also think the advantage might be is if you have your quarterback in Wilson. And let's say we took Wilson there instead of Rodgers, rather than stacking with Judy, it almost would make more sense to stack later with Tim Patrick, and that way you're not forced to play Patrick every week. You're probably going to play Russell Wilson every week, and then when you think, okay, this is any division game, for instance, this is the week where it could be a big shootout. That's where you maybe want to play that stack and get that second player in. I guess if we had gone Wilson here, we would have been forced to kind of play Judy Wilson every week just because of where we're drafting them, most likely, especially starting 3 wide receivers. Judy's probably in the lineup. The other alternative is you take a second quarterback real quick after Wilson, and then you play the matchups there, but that you're investing a little bit too much, I think, into both. So, maybe stack with Rodgers later might make sense, and it's a receiver you don't have to play every week.
That's true. It's a good point.
I like that.
All right. So basically, things flew off the board. Kenneth Walker flew off the board. Devin Singletary, Cordell Patterson, which is interesting. The Buffalo Bills comes off the board. Look at our first defensive pick. All right, nice. I mean, we are missing a defensive position. Just saying, we're not going to pick anybody, but he's up there right there. So now we're looking at depth. We're missing a spot of defense and kickers. We're not going to go that route. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bench spots left. So we're in that final little run right there. So things that pop out to me, you guys feel free to jump in. James Cook floating around in the 9th round. That's a interesting, late round selection. I feel like he has some upside as a pass catcher coming out of Buffalo, but we'll see how that goes. Tony Pollard definitely is an interesting one, and Chris Olave in New Orleans. So those are some and even Garrett Wilson. Wow, there are some pretty good value picks in that round.
Yeah, 3 rookies and 5 picks there between Burks, Olave, and Wilson.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. As we've been live on the air, I was really hoping in round 12 in Scott Fish Bowl that Treylon Burks fell to me, and Laurie Foster just broke my heart by taking him 3 picks before me. So I'm a little devastated right now. To see him go before we pick here, plus at Scott Fish Bowl, it just is
it's like a nightmare now. It's like a PTSD. You got over there. All right, so let's start pulling the trigger on these a little bit quicker. Just pick up the pace a little bit. So
I would imagine from this point on, now that we've invested in Rodgers, invested in Kelsey, we're not I'm of the school when you take a guy at either of those positions early, you don't worry about their backups. I think there'll be enough quarterbacks and tight ends on the waiver wire that your backup at each position is the free agents, and you worry about it week to week. So I would say from here on out, we just go running back, wide receiver, and then kicker, defense, our last 2 picks. That's how I would go about it. I don't know if you
like it. Yeah, I agree with you. I'm a safe spot. I agree with you.
And then so that way we know we can just ignore the quarterback tight ends list completely and just look at the running back, wide receiver positions too, which might help speed things up. But that's also, I think that's how my process goes into these drafts anyway. Like you're spending a first round pick on Kelsey, don't bother taking another tight end.
I agree with you.
You're never benching Kelsey, and the 1 week you're not playing him is his bye week. So figure that out. 2 weeks before, the week before, you have time to figure that out. Who is going to be that replacement? Why set yourself on an outcome now and draft someone and like, okay, I have to hold them until this bye week, and then you lose your roster flexibility. So get the extra running back wide receiver that you can later drop if you need to.
Tight end, you either go really early and you get someone you're going to start all year long, or you start going in that like the streaming every week is kind of what the route you go, in my opinion. So that's kind of where I'm at
entirely.
All right, so Melvin Gordon is on the board. He's the highest rated spot at 85. Russell Gage is being suggested to us by Fantasy Pros. We're in tier 8. We see Zach Ertz floating around, but we talked about not necessarily going that route. Matthew Stafford is still out there. Everybody's sweetheart last year, Ramondre Stevenson, who didn't do a damn thing last year, is on the board. We see him over here. Trey Lance, Kadarius Toney. Let's see if he has his cleats ready to go. I have no idea about that. Ronald Jones, Derek Carr, Kirk Cousins. Is there anybody? Tyler Boyd is around, and Michael Gallup late. Those are actually pretty intriguing picks. So, what do you guys see in a pair to like? I guess it's technically Kyle's this round, right? What do you think, Kyle?
Well, you mentioned Boyd, and there's one other name that kind of speaks to me as Boyd. Slot receiver. We're hoping for. I think with Boyd, we're hoping just for that offense being so good that he gets the volume there anyway. It's such a good offense that you don't mind already having Mixon on the team to also taking Boyd. Like that's one where you just play them and maybe like with Boyd, that's again, knowing you're probably playing Mixon every week. Boyd is the guy where this is a shootout week for the Bengals. I want both players in the lineup. Oh, this is maybe a lower scoring run heavy game. Take Boyd out and just play Mixon. So Boyd makes sense. The one guy that stood out to me was Jacoby Myers. I think it was 126 targets last year. And the only guy they've really brought in to maybe take away from that is Devontae Parker.
Parker, yep.
Is Parker the new number one in New England, or is it still Jacoby Myers? If it's still Jacoby Myers, he seems like he'd be a great value just based purely on volume. But I don't know. Do we think he's going to repeat the target share from last year?
That's true. 126 targets for him with 826 yards. Pretty interesting. I didn't know all that. I didn't have any ownership of Jacoby Myers last year, so I forgot about that.
And I think it was something like the most receptions without a touchdown. So it was a big celebration when he got that first one late in the season, which was kind of interesting. For me, when I'm in leagues like this, one thing that I would look at, the only other thing I would maybe look at is someone like a Michael Carter, because we did invest in Breece Hall. And if something happens to Breece Hall, you get that insurance. I do think Michael Gallup's an interesting one with Amari Cooper gone. I think this is finally the first year where Michael Gallup gets to step up. We know Dak Prescott can spread the ball across two receivers pretty well and prolifically in an offense. So that would be an area that I would look. And then the other thing is, just from an NFC East perspective, I really liked Kadarius Toney coming out of college. I felt like he was a great playmaker. And when he's got the ball in his hands, there aren't too many receivers better at, being disruptive in the open field. So
I totally agree. He's such a wild card personality-wise. That's the only trick with him. It's the only thing.
Right.
I agree.
To that same point, with Golladay still being there as well, I'd almost want to wait for someone else to make that pick first, and then in the next round grab the second one. Whoever makes it between those two, because I think they both probably have just as much chance to be the Giants' number one receiver. I don't know, unless we think Golladay is completely washed and it really is done. But
I don't. I read something interesting on Golladay that he is one of the most proficient hitch route runners. And looking at the offense that they're installing with Brian Dabble over there, how he used the hitch very successfully over in Buffalo. So that could actually be a sneaky resurgence pick that you're getting very low. That last year was, going in the first 15 to 20 receivers off the board.
Mm-hmm.
I like your idea of the Michael Carter handcuff. I didn't really think about it, but it makes a lot of sense, Ryan. So I might almost even flip my answer to that away from Jacoby Myers. The only thing is, and again, this is handcuff philosophy, so could be an interesting discussion here. Is it better to have your own handcuff or someone else's handcuff? And that way, if you maximize, that other player gets injured, suddenly you have the extra running back. And maybe there's more risk. Your guy gets hurt and suddenly you have a backup and an injured player. But Melvin Gordon would almost seem to me making sense. If something ever happened to J. Williams, you've got probably a top 15 to top 5 running back. That's kind of come into your lineup in a high efficiency offense. Do you want to take him if you've already invested in Jerry Jeudy and not invested in Russell Wilson? I suppose actually, is Russell Wilson still available?
I'll take a look. Yes,
I know we said avoid. Ignore.
And Stafford's available. See, it's pretty crazy.
I don't know. I think both are possible. The Michael Carter handcuff does make sense though, strategically for the team.
Yeah, you never know. Maybe year 2, Zach Wilson. The Jets kind of coming around a little bit. I can go any one of those. I like Melvin Gordon is an interesting handcuff. I like that a lot. Michael Carter's pretty interesting. I like the dart throw of Michael Gallup coming back and kind of buying, like the Dallas Cowboys are the number 1 rated offense in the entire league last year, scoring over 500 points and getting that wide receiver 2 on your team, especially if you have them kind of like tucked away on your bench. Like, you can basically, like, let's say he doesn't actually start playing till midway through the season and a couple games out, you don't have to rely on him because we already have 3 wide receivers already. But so I can go any route with it. And I think technically it's Kyle's decision this round, right? So Kyle, either way.
I think so. Looking at this team, I think one fear is, okay, what's the early stretch going to be? Is there any hiccups? Jerry Jeudy coming to the new offense? What's J.K. Dobbins' health? Is Breece Hall going to take over this offense? And if he doesn't, maybe that means more work for Michael Carter. So I think taking Carter maybe alleviates some of those early season worries. So I'll vote for the handcuff and take Michael Carter.
Plus, we also have a little turnaround coming on this pick too, so we're actually going to get away with some of this stuff too. So, Michael Carter, welcome to our squad. Yeah, you saw it.
Goes Russ and our staff.
Yeah. All right. So Russell Wilson off the board, Melvin Gordon, Christian Watson, Julio Jones. Free agent Julio Jones off the board. Team 11 has that downfield vision. Good for him. Okay, I like that. So
Team 11's like 12 years in already.
Exactly. Team 11's going to take a kicker next round, so get ready for that. So we'll see how that goes.
So Michael back-to-back picks. Michael Gallup, Michael Carter, or Michael Carter, Michael Gallup, I should say. We ran off.
I wouldn't be mad at that one bit. I don't know how you guys
I
feel
would
about it.
pull the trigger on Gallup and be happy with that.
Yeah,
I like those slot receivers, but maybe there's hope one of them will fall. Whether it's Boyd, Myers, I thought I saw another name
one
too.
of them falls. I think
even Landry can kind of fall into that same.
I agree.
And then both the Giants guys. So enough of those guys fall. Maybe I could see taking the upside on this offense. Outside of the Jets, I think we've done a really good job to invest in a lot of high scoring offenses.
I agree.
I always get surprised at how reactionary the fantasy community is, because we talk about someone like Jarvis Landry in a PPR, who has been one of the most consistent PPR receivers for quite some time now, since he came out as a rookie at LSU. And I just feel like he had one kind of down year, goes to a new place in New Orleans. I feel like that's a good spot for him. So I agree. I think from a slot. There's Jahan Dotson.
Jahan Dotson fell off the board.
All the guys that we talked about just went. So yeah. I don't know that anyone we were talking about.
Elijah Moore, actually, he hasn't been taking it either. I kind of like him as a kind of a deep sleeper later on, but we can see how that goes.
Elijah Moore should be off the board, to be honest with you, and I haven't even been.
Is he off the board? I didn't see him. I would have noticed that, but let me take a look.
If he isn't, let's just pull the trigger there, because that's great value.
Jameson Williams on the Lions, DJ Shark, Jameson Crowder in Buffalo is a nice little high upside pick.
I feel like Elijah Moore has probably gone.
Yeah, but I don't see, where is he?
He's gonna be gone.
Can you go back to the draft board? Maybe?
Can you go to the draft board real quick? Here he is. Yeah, he went earlier, round 6. Okay, I must have missed
no way he's still.
There's no way Michael Carter's going ahead of Elijah Moore. That would have been a mistake on our part, to be fair, too. Yeah. All
right. So what are you thinking, guys? We got on our bench, we have 2 wide receivers and a running back. Zach Ertz is the highest rated person on the board, but we're not going to go tight ends. Matt Stafford's still floating around. Kirk Cousins, McKissick, Tua, Noah Fant. A lot of tight ends and quarterbacks. Can he get Kenneth Gainwell from the Philadelphia Eagles is around?
Jamal Williams from Detroit. We didn't take Swift. Is this maybe the back end way to invest into that offense? And that, especially if Swift doesn't handle a ton of carries, Jamal Williams likely will. And if ever Swift's hurt, then you got to imagine Jamal's getting the whole workload himself. He didn't do it often in Green Bay, but whenever he did, it was because he was the only guy there. Like, he's the type of guy that you can trust to play 100% of the snaps. You don't want to do that every week, but the weeks where he does, it could be great. But it's, you might not also not know when that week comes. Like, the week Swift gets hurt, it'd be amazing. Is Jamal going to be great the next week though? But that's maybe the one running back that kind of stood out to me in terms of very good handcuff, but almost a handcuff plus, in that he could be playable on his own even with the Swift injury, just because they did run so many times last year.
True.
Yeah, that's a good call.
Ryan, technically it's your lead, Ryan, this round.
There's a couple routes you could go. I think someone like a Jameson Williams has, we're invested pretty heavily in wide receivers. We can wait for him to see what he is and come back from that ACL injury, that's probably the direction that I would go. The other way that I would go is looking at like a Matthew Stafford or a Zach Ertz to get that reliable backup. Or
I like that
in
too.
case Kelsey or Rodgers goes down, I always like to have a backup plan. I don't like to like one guy goes down and my season's over kind of thing. So
I agree.
That's where I would start looking at those like higher tier backups, like Stafford.
Stafford on the bench. Let's say Aaron Rodgers does have a bad season, and then Matt Stafford starts blowing up.
I was going to say that Stafford's almost. You're probably not even talking backup. You're. I think if you're taking Stafford, you're playing the matchups every week. You're going to decide who do you think has the best passing volume, and you can decide. I actually played a single quarterback league last year, and I can't remember if I made the playoffs or not. I definitely didn't win it, but where I basically did that with Rodgers and Cousins, and Cousins wasn't even drafted. And it was just something kind of mid-season. Rodgers struggling a little bit last year. Not, some good games, but it was, it was really high volatile, kind of a lower floor than normal. So it made sense to kind of have Cousins. And I felt like I was actually able to pick pretty well. There were some weeks where I'd go with Cousins and he'd outperform. Any head-to-head week, it seemed obvious to go with Rodgers, just the better defense being with the Packers. So you play against the worst defenses. That's what you kind of aim for. So I think
I was going to say, just for like downfield vision, Team 11 does not have a quarterback, neither does Team 12. So if we do like Matt Stafford, it might be an opportunity for them to jump on that. So I don't know, Matt Stafford, if we got him, we could probably get one of these other guys on the way back if we want to go that route. And I think Matt Stafford is a pretty high upside pick. And at this point in the draft, in my opinion, you're kind of going for BPA, high upside thing, a little dark.
I think Team 12 might be the only team without a quarterback. And it almost feels like Stafford should be the QB 12. And we're unbalancing it by doing it. We don't let this team that feels like they're waiting for the longest to get that QB 1. And it's there for them if we let them get Stafford. And if not, then suddenly they have to dip into that extra tier. So it's almost playing defense on
the defensive
team
strategy
that's close to us in the draft, and we can kind of control it. So I think it makes a lot more sense to me than going with the backup tight end, because the problem with the backup tight end, even if we got Zach Ertz, we'd never play Zach Ertz ahead of Travis Kelce. We can envision
the only difference between backup quarterback to tight end, though, is you can flex the backup tight end. You can't flex the quarterback.
That's a good point.
So I don't mind going Ertz, and I feel like with Kyler Murray there, and now DeAndre Hopkins is on, is out suspended for 6 weeks. I know they brought in Hollywood Brown, but like that might be. He was one of the top tight ends last year. At least you could get good points out of him. To me, if I'm looking at this, and because it values running quarterbacks, like Derek Carr, I think is going to have a big season in Las Vegas.
I agree with that.
I think Trey Lance is a fun pick, as is Justin Fields and a couple of the other younger guys. I'd be between probably Stafford, Ertz, and Jamison Williams at this point.
I like those. Those are three interesting ones that I would look at too. Those are three. Jameson Williams, high upside. I do. What was the second one you said? I like Matt Stafford for sure. What was the third one you're looking at? Zach Ertz.
And so George, full point PPR is
you got to take this one.
And to your point, Ryan, earlier with how can you flex Ertz? I think if it was a half point PPR league, you probably want to almost always flex a running back. Full point PPR, okay, then you don't mind having the pass catcher be in the flex. I still prefer to only flex a tight end if it's a tight end premium league, but this isn't the worst league to do it in either, so it is viable.
First of all, thank you guys. I really appreciate talking to you guys, talking through it. You guys are really knowledgeable, great points. This is awesome. I'm glad we did this, by the way. So I think if I get to pull my druthers, I'm going to go Matt Stafford, man. I kind of like what Kyle was talking about with Matt Stafford. You do play the matchups. Like I understand the whole Zach Ertz flex rationale and the PPR rationale, but like I do, like, if there's a brutal matchup for Aaron Rodgers, he got dinged up, or is he's having a bad season, having a quarterback that threw 41 touchdowns last year in your arsenal when the Rams are just on fire, including if they're playing the Jaguars this week or something like that, would be fantastic to have. So I'm not going to, raise my nose to that at all. So welcome to our team, Matt Stafford.
I like that a lot. George, if you got Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs and they're playing in Green Bay and you got a bad snowstorm and bad weather and Stafford's over in LA, pull the trigger on Stafford. I like
100%. And then in theory, you could technically trade one of the quarterbacks if you really have to. So, if we ever,
they all just went Lance and Carr, the two that I would have said.
You know what, George? That's actually not a bad strategy. And just to kind of go off what Ryan just said, if you're afraid maybe of Rodgers' late season schedule, is he someone that he's the best trade candidate? Like you play a few games them early and then sell him on a high. Maybe right now his value isn't great because people are concerned with the weapons. If get in season and okay, he's throwing a ton of touchdowns, he might score 35 touchdowns. That's a great time to trade him, if maybe before that winter playoff schedule, and then you really focus on Stafford at that point.
Great point. And we kind of bullied Team 12 and taking quarterbacks, as you guys alluded to. Trey Lance and Derek Carr going that route, so we see that. All right, so let's take a look at the board. We talked about Jameson Williams potentially being available, Zach Ertz, to see if they're still around, which they are. So it should be an easy decision. You want to go Zach Ertz or Jameson Williams? What do you guys think here?
I'm actually leaning Jameson Williams for the upside.
That's true.
I think I am too. Now, man, Zach Ertz could just see a ton of targets, though. That is true. But I guess the one hesitation with Williams, okay, we've already got a couple of injured guys, a couple of young guys. Is that something that we feel is too much of youth and too much injury? Like, Dobbins,
112
Breece
targets
Hall,
for Zach Ertz.
Michael Gallup. So is that maybe, I don't know.
112
what do you guys think?
Targets, and he wasn't even with Arizona the whole season. Let's pull the trigger on Ertz. I'm sold.
Go for it.
Yeah.
And if that's something, again, you're looking at, you make those two investments at the position, looking to trade one. If Ertz booms early in the season, he's probably a really good trade candidate to someone whose tight end is struggling.
And look, we
100%.
just created a little run on tight ends. So I think we're going to have Jameson Williams fall into our lap anyway.
That's awesome. So I think you're right, actually. So taking a look, we're gonna have I think our team's pretty well rounded. He went right here. Damn.
1202 or 1302.
All
right, cool. All right, so J.D. McKissic.
Not many wide receivers, though. It's funny that like the only two that stood out were the two rookies for some reason, which leaves us, I think, a lot of wide receivers here, though. So I'm curious to see what the depth is.
So want to take a look at the wide receivers? Okay, so wide receivers: DJ Chark, Corey Davis, McCole Hardman, Van Jefferson, Sterling Shepard, Robbie Anderson. Jameson Crowder's kind of sneaky in Buffalo, the starting slot with Josh Allen. It might be a little high volume right there. I kind of like that pick. Curtis Samuel. I don't know.
Is the Stafford Van Jefferson stack? Maybe I'm too high on Van Jefferson, but is that something that's tempting there?
I think
800 TRs.
I personally think he's getting a little. He had some games where they targeted him. He didn't do enough with the targets for me to be overly excited about him. If they hadn't brought in Allen Robinson, I think I'd be all in on Jefferson. But one of the guys that actually is interesting from like a safety perspective is like Nico Collins, because they really only have Brandon Cooks, and he started to kind of show up a little bit last season. So that's an interesting pick for me. I like what you said, Kyle, before about the backups and securing like somebody else's handcuffs. So maybe even like a Brian Robinson in case something happens to Antonio Gibson. I think that's why Washington drafted him. I think that's they drafted him specifically to say
be a touchdown vulture as well. I think too.
I think so too. And I think when I look at it, like we haven't had, I say we as like Washington fans, like they haven't had the guy that if Gibson goes down can be that lead guy. And that's why I think we've always had McKissic. We had Barber that could churn out that short yardage and everything. We had Jarrett Patterson last year that stepped in a little bit. But I feel like Brian Robinson would be the guy that would be able to lead that backfield. And Gibson's missed games every year so far. So I think it's, that's an opportunity for us to maybe grab somebody that could be that like plug and play here and there pretty late. And, if Antonio Gibson happens to go down, could be a really nice player for us.
Cowboy's still around, by the way. Jamal Williams is still here too.
I almost forgot about him. Yeah.
You know what, Kyle, that was your boy from like 3 rounds ago. So I feel like that should be the pick.
I think, just looking through those backup running backs, he probably has the most standalone value of everyone that's there. And again, if the injury happens, he has the huge upside boost. Whereas like Robinson, it's tough to envision him getting too much without Gibson getting hurt. I mean, if McKissic gets hurt, it's probably.
I agree with that. I honestly
Robinson might get more carries, but simply because Gibson's going to get more targets, right?
And McKissick's going to be heavily involved if Antonio Gibson goes down.
I agree.
I agree with that. That's
Khalil Herbert would be the only other name where I think it's like, I think he's the clear backup, but because he did well last year when he had the role, but it's also, he was a 7th round pick, and they just made another 7th round pick at the running back. Does this regime view Travis Ebner and Khalil Herbert as equal? Whereas us, the fantasy community, really views, okay, what Herbert did last year, he's a very clear backup. So I feel more safe with Williams because I think they've paid him the contract. Like, it's the same coaching staff that like this is their guy they brought in, and they really didn't bring in any of the other running backs to kind of compete with Swift or Williams. They brought in backs to kind of compete with their third guy. So
let's do it. I agree. All right, here we go. Jamal
and
Williams pull the trigger.
Missing out on Jamison Williams, we still get a Williams who's on the Lions. So we
Jay Williams. We get a Jay Williams from the Lions.
All right, now we're in the depths of the abyss. We're looking at defense and kickers. So,
well, and this is another interesting point. Do we have to draft defense and kickers? Because, and this is to question like our listeners and viewers as well. If you don't have to, don't feel like you need to take a defense and kicker. I think especially like for those positions, I'm especially defense. I'm looking a lot of times at who are they playing week 1, and I'm not really looking much further past the 1 week away. And I find whoever my kicker is, because it's tough to know which week the kicker is going to go off. It's not always okay. Highest scoring team, the kicker is going to do the best. It's okay. The team is going to do well enough to get in field goal range, but not well enough to score touchdowns. So this kicker is going to kick multiple field goals, and they're going to score 4 or 5 field goals. That's what gives you the big boom ceiling kicker weeks. Not, oh, this offense was amazing, the kicker scored 7 points because they only kicked point afters.
Yeah,
good floor.
I always go Ravens. I always go Raven kickers, or definitely buy the high upside offense like Buffalo or the Rams want to go that route. I see where you're coming from. I definitely agree.
But my whole point is usually like I'm not really streaming kickers. And I'll kind of compare week to week. Like I'll draft if I have a kicker on my team, I'll usually hold them until their bye week, and then at their bye week decide, are they a good enough kicker where I'll take the other bench spot and hold them because I want to have them back. And if they're not, just cut them at that point. But I'm also up to that point. Like, let's say they have a late bye, like week 10. Up to that point, I'm probably looking and seeing, okay, is this kicker one of the top 12 kickers in the league? Are they scoring well relative to everyone else? Or is there another player out there? If that other player out there doesn't exist, I'm usually holding my guy. If my guy can be a top 12, be in top 10 and be in that average, I'm fine with playing the averages week to week and not really worried about it. And because I'm not so worried about it, I also don't mind just picking up my kicker the week of week 1, and the same with defenses. So that'd be just the one comment here to everyone drafting. If you're in a draft and you have defense and kickers, but you don't have to draft them, I'm fine taking the extra position players, having extra depth, and then week 1, I'll drop those 2 players and pick up the kicker defense.
Yeah, and then if top tiers are there, though, I do tend to grab them because I've been in leagues where I've done that, and I've regretted being in hell for kickers and defenses. And it just happens that the week I need them, the free agent defenses don't have a favorable matchup. I do like to just play one kicker for most of the season because I feel like the law of averages, and at some point, if you try to do the guessing game on kickers, I think it could bite you. I'm going to give you a name, Evan McPherson. I just like to root for him because of what he did in the playoffs for the Bengals. That's who I'd pull the trigger on just for pure enjoyment.
All right, just want to do it. Who cares? It doesn't matter about kickers. I was going to say Matt Gay for the Rams, but Evan McPherson, he has a strong leg too. Screw it. Let's do it.
Yeah, he can kick from far distances. No, and I think, again, Tucker's gone. He's the one where it's like, hey, that offense is good, but maybe not necessarily going to score a ton of touchdowns. So like he's always seems like he's in the mix to be that highest scoring guy. So yeah, McPherson's great because it's a good offense that should be moving the ball, and if they can't score touchdowns, it's even more ceiling for him.
Any defenses that tickle your fancy by any chance? The New Orleans Saints is the top one. Chargers. They have Khalil Mack now, right? They have Khalil Mack, and I believe someone else is on their team. Okay, Bosa, obviously.
J.C. Jackson, right? They got the corner too.
Yeah, exactly. They did. Yep. So the Chargers are definitely intriguing. Ravens are always pretty good. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Obviously, go with the week 1 matchups, like I said.
Commanders resurgence, Ryan. Is joking.
Honestly, all joking aside, I always get like drawn to the Commanders defense, and I always get my heart broken.
Yeah, me too.
They are playing Jacksonville week 1. So
that's true. That's a good point.
This is a full press coverage Commanders pod, so I think we could celebrate that by just, again, knowing you're picking this defense for week 1 and probably dropping them, right? So I'd be okay with Washington just because it's the Jaguars.
Throw it up. Let's get one. Do we
let's
have
get
any Washington players? Do you have any Washington players?
I don't think so, actually. I don't think so, which is pretty good, which means we were being objective. I like
that. We talked a bit about Terry McLaurin. We considered Allen Robinson at one point, so it's not like we were ignoring him completely. It just never came up as good values.
Let me get a screenshot of this. I can post it on Twitter in a second. I'm gonna leave the grade out. I'm gonna leave this 78 out of 100 out just so we can have an objective analysis by our fans in a second. So
Well, and
we'll
I
see how
think,
that goes. Let me save this.
part of that is maybe not having a backup tight end, so it'll count.
Yeah,
Kelsey's
they'll hurt
week
him
as a
a little
zero.
bit.
Like, I know that's how these grades tend to work is also through projection. So if you end up with a week where you get 0 from your starter, they'll just throw that in the grade, and it really affects it. So I find like for our draft strategy, if you're going to go with the tight end early and not take the backup, you're going to get hurt a bit in those draft grades. Same with like if you don't take a backup quarterback.
If you get an A+ on the consensus grade, you're not going to win your league.
That's 100%.
Now this is a simulator, so I think we want to be
like, if Yahoo picks your team as the best draft in your league, you're not winning your league.
100%.
Trade your players because they're clearly highly valued.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, so real quick before we kind of wrap it up, let's do one little overview of our team, and then basically we can kind of send us all off. So, can you guys see this? Or you can? Oh no, you guys can't.
Yeah.
Hold on.
I'm
trying to find a better view for you guys. Let me take a. So you did Aaron Rodgers, Jackson, Breece Hall, Deontay Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Travis Kelce, Dobbins. Okay, pretty solid altogether. Is there any picks you're regretting now? Or are you guys pretty happy with our team?
Hall, I felt like was a little bit early for me. I
that was Manny's boy.
But I still like Michael Carter a lot. But Breece Hall could be special, so I'm okay with the dart throw there. The pick that really got me was the Travis Kelce in the first round. I've seen many teams win the league with them. Once a guy hits 32, 33 at the tight end position, I never want to be the one that holds the bag when they're falling off that cliff from the age gap.
The one thing I want to say, I tend to agree with you in regard to taking a tight end that early. I kind of hesitate in regard to that. I think we kind of got away with one. I think we have a pretty balanced team when it's all said and done.
I agree.
Like, if you look, like, honestly, realistically, I would say you don't take Breece Hall there. You might take J.K. Dobbins there, like in a real draft, right? So if you're walking away with Aaron Rodgers, Joe Mixon, J.K. Dobbins, Deontay Johnson, Jerry Jeudy, Travis Kelce, you're starting to look pretty solid altogether, especially with our bench over here. So I think we kind of got away with the one.
So we probably would have gone Travis Etienne, right? So it's just
true.
as much risk with an unknown. So that's why it made sense with Hall, because all the guys we were considering, I think we were considering Dobbins there too. So in that sense, we played it right, because if we had taken Dobbins, Hall might not have fallen.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
So, Kyle, any last minute conversation before you close it all down?
I guess, I think my pick to regret might be Aaron Rodgers, just in that, man, we got great value on Stafford, and we might have been able to get Wilson around later than Rodgers, but we also, there was a fear that all 4 of those guys could have gone in that round on that turn. So we kind of, we had risked it up to that point, and I think maybe going early tight end, I think we were pretty disciplined on we wanted to take Jackson at this point. Oh, that running back stack, and there were points where we could have. But I think also staying disciplined and knowing, okay, we went early tight end. We need to kind of build the depth at other positions. If you're going to go early on the tight end like that, it's really imperative to then wait at quarterback. And we probably could have even pushed that a little bit further on waiting. But again, that was a risk at that point. We wanted to make sure we were
patient with quarterbacks, but still walked away with Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford. So that's pretty wild right there. That's pretty cool.
Yes. And I think that just goes to show you don't have to get desperate with your quarterbacks in a 1-quarterback league. That's a prime example of like round 3, round 4. Sometimes just let the quarterbacks fall to you.
Back 100%. To tiers, right? I think we all might have Lamar Jackson as the QB4, but because it's QB4 at the top of a big second tier, which includes guys like Rodgers and Stafford, frankly, for me, you may as well just wait for those guys as opposed to reaching on the QB4, even if he is like, okay, I do really want this guy. So back to why those tiers really help in drafts, I find.
Yep.
So fellas, that was actually a blast. I really enjoyed myself. I really loved learning from you guys as well. So if you guys are up for maybe another time before August comes around, we'll definitely do one more breakdown. It'd be pretty cool. So guys, that's awesome. So to kind of send it on home, Kyle, we'll start off with you, man. So where can they find you on social media? What products are you working on? Kind of plug yourself, please.
All right, so I'm on Twitter at Senra Says, and as George mentioned at the top, I'm also with Full Press Coverage, and I've got 2 podcasts, the Full Press Fantasy Pod and the Full Press Packers Pod. You can check out those accounts as well on Twitter at FPC_Fantasy Pod for the Fantasy Pod account, and FPC_Packers for everything Packers related to the podcast, articles as well. So appreciate that everyone checks that out. Appreciate all the support for Full Press Coverage, and appreciate George for asking me to come on. This was awesome.
It was a good time. Ryan, what about you, bro? Break it all down.
Yeah. So I'm very active on Twitter. Come find me at WhatGibbsFF, like Joe Gibbs, WhatGibbsFF. Love talking anything Washington Commanders. Love talking anything fantasy football related. So come smash that follow button at What Gives FF and come interact on Twitter. Check out the Scott Fishbowl stuff that's going on, and then we'll be doing a lot of stuff with Announce the Pick, which is a great way for fans to interact with fantasy analysts, pro athletes, to have like a quick little video segment where they read out your fantasy football pick that you want to announce and drives money to charity, like the Hog Farmers. Got to give them a shout out. Do some stuff with St. Jude and a couple other charities. So that's definitely something we'll be getting going as we get closer to the season starting.
Definitely follow both these guys. Are definitely good people just in general, but then on top of that, they're very intelligent, very knowledgeable, just fun to interact with on social media. So hit them up. Make sure you guys follow them. Guys, I'm George Carmi. You can find me at gcarmi21, managing editor of the Full Press Commanders at FBC_Commanders, host of the Full Press Commanders podcast. And thank you for listening, guys. Take care and have a great night. Peace.